Meeting of the Board of Education, CUSD 201, today, April 28, 2015. And if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. February 24th, 2015. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the closed session of the February 24th, 2015 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Did she say February?
February 24th.
Okay, March 10th. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the first closed session of the March 10th, 2015 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the second closed session of the March 10th, 2015 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
March 24th. I asked Judy to add something, so in your folder, there is a piece of paper, and in keeping with keeping trees clean, on page 3, I'm asking to put in the end of that sentence. It says, on page 3, Mrs. Charlton asked if it would be possible for the school district to set aside the funds to address these building issues, and I'm asking if we could add, if the referendum does not pass.
Well, that's fine.
Anybody have any? It was just a comment I was making during the meeting. Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the revised minutes of the March 24th, 2015 regular meeting of the Board of Education as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the April 14, 2015 regular meeting of the Board of Education as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Then public comment. Are there any public comments? Okay, then we will move to the consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions?
I have one question, and I want to apologize, Kevin and Kim, because I prepared an email to ask you this question last night. Okay. But for some reason it didn't send. I'm looking at it right now. So with the disposal of property, and I think this has probably been asked countless times and may have even been asked by me in the past, can that ever be resold, or, big garage sale, or, or even, because do we donate that equipment, or do we, it's wiped and then?
I'll let Nadine talk about the technology equipment.
The equipment is provided to a company that would destroy the hard drives and take all the security measures to make sure that any data is on that equipment is disposed of or
right.
not available. And in terms of selling the equipment, that's not typical for school districts, because if you sell something, then you are to the community, then you are responsible for what happens at the other end. So typically, we choose a disposal company that specializes in school equipment, and then they recycle it, or they sell it for scrap, or they destroy the pieces and
Yeah, I'm asking only because, there's so many of our families that some of these might actually be newer than mine at home, and, because I don't get new ones until they completely die.
we don't either.
So these are,
No, this is not worth.
so
this-
even for a family that has nothing,
Correct.
this would
Yeah.
not be better?
The devices that are on this list are not not operational. They've been stripped of a lot of their parts and you know, because we take pieces from one and put them in the other, so they're not suitable for, to give to members of our community.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thanks.
Okay, sorry.
So I didn't mean to catch you
Oh,
off guard
that's
again,
okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, are there any other questions or concerns? All right. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Number 1, personnel recommendations. Number 2, adoption of board policies. 3, approval of SACID classroom lease. 4, disposal of equipment. 5, abatement of working cash funds. 6, approval of April 2015 expenditure report. And 7, ratification of March 2015 regular payroll.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please, Mrs. McMahon.
Ms. Cabarelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Notbush?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes. Okay, then the first item under discussion is the library presentation.
Hi, Mrs. Charlton, the Board of Education, Mr. Carey. I'd like to introduce some friends of mine. They're going to make a presentation that will demonstrate their participation in the educational process for our students and show you some interesting projects and things that they've been working on that are particularly engaging for our students. So I'm not sure which order they're going to go in, so I'll introduce them one at a time. So this is Rebecca Johnson. She's our Miller Media Specialist. Mrs. Karen Johnson, she's from Manning. Sheila Rue is from the junior high, and Michelle Therese is from the high school. So I know you'll really enjoy what they've what they put together for us.
Thank you, Nadine, for the introduction and support tonight. And thank you for the Board of Education for giving us this opportunity to show us, to show you what we have been supporting throughout the year to the students and the staff of CUSD 201. April is School Library Month, so there is no better time to share how our district libraries impact student lives and learning. We hope to share images from our district libraries while offering a glimpse into how we support the curriculum, students, and staff in CUSD 201. We hope you enjoy the presentation. Our district media specialists strive to support our faculty, staff, and student population. Together, our 4 district media specialists provide services for approximately 3,100 students per week. Our labs and libraries support 116 classes per week, and we manage a combined collection of approximately 36,000 titles. Miller's library program works to integrate technology whenever possible. Our computer lab, netbook cart, and Chromebook cart are used throughout the day by our students. Kindergarteners might use Pixie to retell a story. A first grader might use the smartboard in the library, then move on to the computer lab to create a story using an online comic strip creator. A 4th grader uses Google Drive to complete the Recipe of Me project. Or a 5th grader, you might see a 5th grader researching on their Chromebook during Genius Hour. Literacy is a core value which we all share. We provide quality literature to our students and teachers. We support the growth of future leaders within our school walls. And here's the librarian of the day. Book clubs provide opportunities for great books with great lunchtime discussions. We also support a sense of community to connect outside of our building. Great things are happening in the library.
Along with technology and literacy, Manning's library program also incorporates the community in a variety of ways. Salt Creek Ballet has partnered with both Miller and Manning for increased exposure opportunities to the arts. Literacy through movement incorporates music and dance along with folk and fairy tales for our second grade students. The success of this program has brought about increased opportunities for movement with now both our kindergarten and first grade classes as well. Other community relationships include various business and service representatives who come in to share information about their career. The Gregg House, who shares the beginnings of Westmont with our beginning first grade students, our Barnes & Noble family reading nights, and a mystery day with a visit from an FBI agent who helped our 3rd through 5th grade students solve a crime, complete with surveillance video, writing samples, DNA, and fingerprints. Research is a large component of the Common Core instructed and supported by the library. Whether kindergarten students are learning what a nonfiction source is and what information it provides compared to their love of fiction stories, or first graders use computers to broaden their knowledge of authors and illustrators, or even 4th grade students who are researching mummification techniques and materials. The library provides multiple resources and opportunities for learning and research. 5th grade research skills are no longer limited to the computer lab or library. With the one-to-one Chromebook program that you've supported, 5th grade students are now able to research and create projects within individual classrooms as well as the library. The library at Manning is a place to dive in, get messy, and explore new learning.
This year, the focus for the junior high has been making literacy an everyday part of the students' lives, both in school and outside of school. We started the year with an open house to showcase all of our new books that we purchased in a kind of Barnes & Noble fashion so that students could go through, browse with their literacy teachers, and make a wish list for the things that they'd like to read this year. Throughout the year, I have book displays to intrigue the students about topics that relate to their lives and are important to them. This example is just about Halloween and scary stories and all those types of things that they love so much. When we have visitors in the building, this year we had visitors from Africa, we had some books on display so students could become familiar with their culture before our visitors arrived. It's also very important to get students excited about reading current events, or current novels rather, on the bestseller list to model for reading for pleasure into adulthood. I want students to really love reading. In fact, some say I'm a little obsessed about it. They're there. An integral part of promoting the love of reading is building relationships with authors, both in person and through their writing. In the fall, Kristen Levine came to the junior high and talked to our Panthers about her books and how she became a writer. Just recently, we had the Westmont, Illinois Reads, where our students were able to meet many authors, and our students participated in book clubs, and then those students became the ambassadors to the authors on that day. This particular student in this picture, their parents had plans on that day, and when she found out she wasn't going to get answers to her questions from the author in person, they changed their plans. We also are going to be doing One Book, One School for summer reading this year. The book will be 33 minutes, and the students were able to meet the author at the Illinois Reads launch. They were very excited. The best part is he'll be coming back again in August after the students have read his book. Another important part of what we do at the junior high is research. This year, we're participating in Genius Hour projects where the students are able to research a topic of their choosing. The Chromebooks have been instrumental in helping facilitate this. Some of the projects the students chose this year were, how has fashion changed over time? How was the Diamond Planet formed? And my favorite, can cross-country improve your health? We've also incorporated Genius Hour with technology. We have a short video. Is it linked, Nadine? Okay, you want to pass out the little things? Yeah, that'd be awesome. I have a short video showing a quick animation of how the students built the drawings in Google SketchUp, and then they were able to actually see the parts themselves being printed with a 3D printer, and so we're passing those out so you can see what they look like. Okay, so let's see if this plays.
Can you see it? So they actually create the drawing in Google SketchUp, and then they transfer it to the 3D printer, and it prints the objects that you're seeing right there. And then the picture in the upper left-hand corner is not something we created, at least not yet. That's actually a prosthetic that students in another community created to help a member of the community who needed a hand. And my dream and my hope is that one day we'll be doing those types of things at the junior high as well.
If you visit the Media Center at any time, you'll find dozens of students reading, studying, collaborating, working on projects. This time of year, you'll find students finishing papers, working on their econ projects, or studying for AP tests. Students come in before school, after school, during lunch, during their study hall periods. Whenever they need to use the resources, the Media Center is available to them. And we are very proud of the culture that we built in the Media Center, which supports our academic program, and it also allows our students to pursue their personal goals and, of course, to read. I'm very proud of my collaboration with teachers in developing a collection that supports student choice in the classroom, and that includes a very impressive new collection of young adult fiction and crossover novels. In fact, our circulation, and I'm really proud of this, is up 500% over the last 5 years, and we anticipate it growing even more. In addition to providing a space for our teachers, and students to thrive, our work outside of the classroom that supports the curriculum is very important. I work with teachers in my building, collaborating on projects and sharing strategies with them for integrating tech in their classroom. I really enjoy working with students also in ways that prompt them to learn the value of information and how to use information to build arguments and ideas and dreams, and ultimately to change their lives. One of the collaborative projects that I'm most proud of is the digital storytelling project that I co-teach with Ron Neurotter, our English teacher. Together, we designed a semester-long oral history project where students research their family backgrounds, record oral tellings of family history, collect artifacts, and then create a digital story that captures this very important part of their strategy. The value of this project is incredible, not only in developing writing skills and the love of storytelling, but also in connecting what they're doing in the classroom to community and family. Connecting learning to the community has always been a goal of mine, and recently I've been incredibly lucky to work with our teachers, here's some more storytelling, to work with our teachers in designing an action research project. Students self-selected to work on a project that included looking at issues in their community and designing plans to address those issues. The projects included planning for the installation of a fully accessible handicap park in Westmont, where students learned about landscaping, park and recreational equipment, and the basics of architectural drawing. Other students learned about urban agriculture when they visited the west side of Chicago to learn how community gardening is changing lives there. They then brought this new interest back to, and there was a slide before this, and shared it with the fourth graders at Manning. Oh, sorry, I ended it. Research has repeatedly shown that strong library media programs like our programs increase student achievement. We are proud of our programs, and we are proud to be a part of Westmont community. Each one of us is committed to supporting the students and the teachers in our district, and we thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. When I grow up, I want to be a librarian so I can work. Thank you for that. Okay, the next item on the agenda is presentation of monthly financial statements. Mrs. Anderson?
This month, we have a little bit more to report than we have in the last several months. Again, the district received about $356,000 from the state this month, and the state's vouchered another $336 in payments that we're waiting on. Since the last meeting, when things weren't too eventful, we've had a lot of activity going on in the state, and Bruce Runner has decided that he needs to do some things to help balance the budget with the elimination of the extra income tax. So anyway, the Public Act 99-0001 has now reduced our spending, state spending by about 2.25%. So we've had reductions of just over $47,000 in this year's programs. So several of our grants, we've gotten notice from the state that we have to amend those down. GSA is going to go down. We've also had some, because of the reductions in state spending for special education, the state did not meet the maintenance of effort for the IDEA grants. And maintenance of effort means that you have to spend at least the same amount in the current year as you did in the prior year. So as a result of that, each district is required to spend a certain amount of their general state aid on special education funding. Now, that's not a problem for us because we spend a significant amount of our funds on special education, so we're just reallocating the way that that's paid. And that portion to our district is only $11,000 because we're not very dependent on general state aid in this district. And then some districts, because they were either in financial distress or had certain circumstances, there was a supplemental $97 million appropriation and a hold harmless clause, but again, our district did not qualify for hold harmless. The other area where we're going to see a little bit of a reduction in revenue is through our lunch reimbursements from the state, and they decreased that reimbursement by a penny per meal. So that's about $100 a month impact to us going forward. And then again, payments for third and fourth quarter mandated categoricals. Not sure, there's lots of speculation out there about what's going to happen with those this year, whether we're going to receive either of those before the end of the year. As you recall, last year we got all four in the current year, which had not happened in a long time. Now it's, there's speculation out there we won't receive the third or the fourth, and that may happen for the next year as well. So again, we continue, that's where we run our models and, plan for these scenarios. What will this look like if, this money's late? So we do cash flow to project where our money's coming in and how we're spending it. And then also we'll, do some scenarios with these things in case of we don't ever get that money or late, that type of thing. So anyway, but yeah, lots going on in the state right now. And I'm going to be at a conference this week where we'll get some updates from the state. So I'll bring you back any information that I find out. As far as the ed and tort funds, again, revenues are comparable to the prior year. Same with O&M. And transportation fund, again, we're waiting on about $142,000 for the state there. And as far as expenditures go, we're really where we have been in prior years. And nothing, all the other reports are attached for your review. Does anybody have questions?
I have one quick question. So, and you probably don't have the answer to this, but I probably assume that Senate Bill 16 that was shelved and all that and put away, this $97 million does not cover that, right? Is this a separate issue?
No, that's not part of that.
Okay.
No, and I hope to receive some updates on that this week as well.
Because that kind of looked like one of those things that they were talking about, but there's more cuts coming, probably.
Could be, yeah. There's lots of happening and lots of speculation about what's going to happen.
Okay.
So.
Okay. That's all I had.
Tim, I have one quick question. I know we were trending toward a balanced budget again this year. I mean, with these changes, how is that going to affect that? Are we still hopeful?
Yeah, I think we're still on target. Now, we did have, some years, some of the schools have not spent all their money. People have been spending more money this year. So we might be a little bit tighter, but we're just we wrapped up spending. The cutoff was at the end of March, and so now we're waiting for all the bills to come in and see where we're at.
Okay. And it was a mild winter, right?
It was a mild winter, relatively speaking.
Okay.
So.
Compared to last year?
Yeah. But we do have that, we have that chiller replacement, so.
Yes.
That will impact the O&M fund.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on that?
No, that's all.
Then the next item on the agenda is the facilities presentation. So I guess the concern is that we had a referendum on the ballot that did not pass. So the issue came up as to what do we do next? So Kevin and I met with Steve and just thought we'd take a look and see what options we do have, since the board and the district are very focused on the safety and security of our students in our buildings and our learning environment. So we wanted to ask Steve to come to this meeting and give us a presentation of what we can potentially do, and then also look at ways to fund that. So unless you have anything else, Kevin? No. So we're eager to hear your presentation.
Thank you. I'll go through this fairly quickly, and then I can come back and we can look at things in greater detail. As Marie said, we met and really talked about, the focus, and is there another way to go about this, spending less money. So it was a fairly fast study over a span of a couple weeks to look at predominantly Miller and Manning and come up with less expensive approaches. So we really walked the site, worked with, kind of brainstormed, got executive construction involved to help us kind of cost different approaches, looked back at some other data on systems, and we really looked at what can we do without doing an addition and to increase the level of security at both buildings. Though not ideal, but coming up with some type of solution. So as you'll see, just because of the configurations of the two schools, Miller was actually simpler to solve in effect than Manning because of lack of space by the stairs and just the way that Manning's designed. So, and then there's some minor changes on the junior high and the high school, and I'll touch on those. So again, no addition, no focus on accessibility, whatever accessibility level there is, we maintain. But we talked about the need to have kind of eyes and ears manning these entrances. If you're not going to have a building office that you can directly see the front door and control that door, how do you do that? And we kind of talked about how some of our other clients that have these old buildings where they cannot funnel people in, how do they solve it? And in many ways, they solve it with some staffing. They have someone, a paraprofessional who, in a way, greets all entries. In some cases, there is no security because it's impossible, so they have staff that are basically walking and maintaining the entrance to the school. We looked at that as one component, but then we looked at, okay, how can we lock down some portion of the entry so when you come in, you restrict people. If they did come in, they can only go so far. So you'll see in Miller, it was a little simpler. We kind of found 3 locations where we could take existing doors and add a door to basically secure that lobby. When you come in the door, that's really as far as you can go. You're stuck there where that stairwell is. Manning is more complicated, and you'll see because of Manning right now, the principal's office, the main office, you can't see anything at the entry. They're kind of blocked. Their configuration north of the stair is a problem because of the way the flight goes up to the second floor. They're really on the wrong side of that stair. We walked and looked at different locations, the alley side, the Linden side, how should we approach it? And this is one solution that you'll see, but there's other options that if this went forward, we'd want to really get into the detail with your administration, with your principals, and really talk about, okay, here's a concept. What do you think about this? Is there another way we can do it and work within these parameters? But we wanted to really quickly get some sense of the dollar amount, because that was really obviously very important. What are we talking? Is this a $100,000 problem, $1 million problem? What is it going to take? Again, there's no real renovation beyond focusing on the security. At the junior high, we looked at the numbers again to see if there's anything we could cut, and it was really trying to eliminate a little bit of finish replacement, so maybe a little bit more cutting and patching versus new finishes where we're enclosing those classrooms, so we were able to find some savings there. At the high school, we looked at any space that was currently enclosed, which are predominantly on the north side of that classroom area, that we wouldn't touch them. They would basically be in their current condition. They are enclosed. They wouldn't match the rest. They'd have, the original HID lighting and all that, but those could be attacked in some future day if you chose to renovate those spaces. So those we were able to back out. The restroom renovations for accessibility, we took that out because, again, that could be done separately at another time. So This is basically showing the first floor of Miller. And if you're familiar, when you come in, on the lower level, there's a series of doors that enclose that stair. They're really just smoke doors. They're wood doors, wood frame. They're not doors that you can really secure. Right now, they're held open, magnetic hold opens, and tied to the fire alarm system. We would remove that frame entirely. On the second level, as you went up towards the second floor or the principal's office, there's a similar set of doors there. Same thing, they're wood doors, wood frames. We would remove that in its entirety, modify the masonry opening. And you'll see that this is going back to the first floor, new construction. As you come into that entrance and turn to the left to go towards the gymnasium, we would install a set of doors there. So you couldn't go any further to into the gymnasium, into the art and music space. You'd be stopped in that lobby area. And then we would remove and replace those lower doors and upper doors. So they'd be new doors, they'd be steel doors, steel frames, ballistic glazing. They would be locked all the time. Other than start of day, end of day, you could unlock them, but they would be locked, and there would be a card reader, fob access to go through those doors. So it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for staff, because if you're going to go to the gym, at one pass, you're going to have to use your fob to get into those doors and allow the kids through. We're going to investigate, if this goes forward, proximity detection to where they wouldn't have to actually have a fob. They could keep it on them or in their pocket, and as they got near the door, it would unlock. We've investigated this before in the district. It's a more upgraded type system, but we think for convenience purposes for the staff that might be something we consider. As you came in, there would be a kiosk or kind of a security station there with someone at that station. There would be a driver's license scanner, so someone would have to literally give their license, be scanned in, given a tag on a lanyard. It would check databases for any kind of known predators. You can also add databases for if there's some kind of local issue, a divorce or something that you need to be aware of, custody issue. And so there'd be that level of security. We would also add, both at Miller and at Manning, a video surveillance system. Right now you have it at the junior high on a low level. You have a larger system with about 15 cameras at the high school. We would install similar systems, so it would be recording. Right now, the airphone, which is used to kind of buzz people in, it's really ineffective. It depends on the time of day, where are they standing. It was interesting, as Kevin and I spent an hour or two at Manning, we saw every problem with the current system. People letting other people in, people coming in going the wrong way, all of a sudden someone coming out of the office running around trying to figure out where they went. So it was really interesting to see, but there's no really good way to see the entrance with a new video security system. The person at the security desk could see, because these would be high-quality cameras outside the building, inside the building, to allow for better visibility. So then on the second level of Miller, it's obviously pretty simple also. So Miller's really 3 sets of doors, a security station where you could have the lobby guard or a Raptor-type driver's license scanning system, the video component. So it basically amounts to about a $270,000 expenditure. So fairly straightforward project. We would reglaze those existing doors, and basically so we'd improve the whole security, but we're working in there. And the advantage is you have that space there. That's a kind of wide open lobby as you come in. So that was $270,000 for total project cost. Manning, similar approach. When someone comes in, right now, when they come in, they kind of go wherever. We talked a lot about where should this entrance be. Should it be continue off of the alley, the way it's currently set up and the way the parking is, or off of Linden? Right now, we're showing it off of the alley. It could be considered the other way. In talking with the principal there at Manning, she really felt, unless there was going to be a drop-off drive or some significant change along Linden, to try to make that the main entrance right now would just be difficult. It would really cause more problems. They like the fact that they've really restricted traffic on Linden during the school day, so when the kids cross the playground, they're not going across. By creating that as a visitor entrance, in a way you'd be creating more traffic on Linden. So this is based on the assumption that we're looking at the entrance being on the west side off of the alley. On the lower level, and it's really a tricky part, because if someone went down the lower level, right now they can go anywhere. We're going to basically change 2 sets of doors that are down there currently and put in security doors. The only place they could go if they either mistakenly or knowingly went to the lower level would be to the bathrooms. They'd kind of be stuck there, couldn't go any further. So that's basically on the left and right of this, that yellow area, which is the center of the corridor. On the first floor, I mentioned the issue about the visibility of that stair. This is the west stair. Right now, the office area is to the north of that. To the south of it is the current nurse's office. The nurse's office, unfortunately, is really the best location to provide visual security for that entrance. It's on the proper side of the stair. What we are proposing to do is basically open up those masonry walls, renovate that space, make that the district office, and have that as a location where then someone can literally see someone as they come in, whether they go down or up, and actually control that entrance. Your nurse's office manning is not really even current practice. It has a hand sink, and it's basically in a couple cots and an office space. What we're proposing is creating a normal nurse's office that can handle a full functioning student, a student with disabilities, staff members, and you'll see that in the renovation. So we kind of flip, as I mentioned in this, we flip the two so that the office goes to the south of the stair and the nurse's office goes to the north. As I mentioned, if you decided, as we went into detailed design on this, that it made sense to do this on Linden, there's an area that we looked at where we feel like that's an opportunity. We might leave the nurse's office over here where there's plumbing, but we could make the main office on the Linden side if that made sense from a design point of view. The cost, as we talked about it would really be probably the same cost, so we really saw this as one design solution that could be executed in multiple ways. On the upper level, there's no doorways in that hallway, and in a way we'd basically be constructing two walls and two sets of doors, changing one classroom entrance so that if we did go up, it was a busy time of day or it was an intruder trying to force their way in, that's as far as they could go is to those bathrooms on the second level. So this shows back to the lower level, two sets of doors. Again, these would be steel doors, steel frames, ballistic glazing. They would be locked. There'd be fob access to get through those doors. So it really creates a vestibule on the lower level. This is the first floor level. And basically, the area that's in the red to the north or to the right of this, that's the nurse's office. And we've basically kind of laid out what is a typical nurse's office from elementary school, where you have a treatment area, you have a bathroom that's fully accessible and can handle anything from just someone who's sick and needs to use the bathroom to diaper changes, an injury that needs to be treated in privacy, and then an office area where there could be some private consultation. On the, where the nurse's office currently is, south of the stairs becomes the main office. We open up two large masonry openings, one on the stairwell and then to the corridor, so they can see what's going on. They'd be able to visually stand in that office area, could see the entrance with or without video support, and they could monitor someone coming in and buzz them in when they believe it's successful. We would definitely want to have a camera on outside the building along the alley, basically looking at the entrance. So instead of just seeing someone's shoulder, which is what they say basically happens, and then they're trying to judge who's that shoulder belong to, you could see the person, the surroundings, and decide if that is someone you should buzz in or not. I think also the community will see a different experience. They're literally going to see a security sequence as they come to the buildings. They'll be greeted, and they'll get a sense that there's more order. It's also very tricky to have an office member trying to secure an entrance. Unless you literally, like at the junior high, they have to come in. They have multiple jobs, and they have multiple tasks. If they're working on a computer, do they really see someone who just came to that door? Having a dedicated person focusing on security and access to the buildings really has a benefit because that's their sole job. At the beginning of the day, they can have a walkie-talkie, be walking the perimeter of the site when buses are coming and making sure that the perimeter is okay, and they can have, throughout the school day, have different functions. But it's a reason why a lot of schools that have issues like you end up hiring a paraprofessional to do that type of work. And then basically to the south of that office is basically the principal's office and then a small meeting space. The vestibule is then secured. Again, they could only go to the restrooms. And then this is the upper level. The green area is that vestibule that we create on the upper level. And that's as far as they could go if they somehow, were not seen or came in and tried to force their way in. They could really just go into those vestibules on the lower level, first floor or second floor, and could not go any further. This project area renovation cost was, I believe, $1,120,000. Obviously, as you can see, it's more extensive. We started with, could we just put doors in, like Miller, and try to see if that's a solution, but there's no place, even if you had a person, there's no place even in the hallway for them to sit where they would not create a problem, because there's just no space. The hallways are full of students, lockers, and traffic. So by creating and renovating this office space, we're at least able to make a more secure entrance. This is the junior high. Again, the junior high, the scope stays pretty much the same. We just look for some slight reductions in scope to try to reduce that cost. I think we went down $75,000, and it was mostly with finishes. And then this is the high school plan, and basically on the right-hand side, those areas in green are existing enclosed classrooms. When they were built back in the 70s, they were enclosed, so we would not do any work in that area. The staff areas that are kind of in the middle of that circle would remain the same, and then the upper level areas would remain the same. So the focus would really be on taking those open classrooms and enclosing them and creating a secure entrance. And then this is a summary of the project cost for each area. It basically totals up to $9,110,000, and then shows the reduction in cost from the previous projects that were part of the referendum. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a quick question. Just looking at the plans, a concern about flow at Manning. Looked to me like the bathrooms are all going to end up inside the secured area. How are students going to go from the classroom to the bathroom and back to the classroom with no key fobs?
They're going to have staff with them. It's certainly not ideal. I would agree with that, but we really talked about it. It was interesting talking with Kristen. I mean, she felt that it's going to take some effort, and that's where I really think Miller is much more straightforward. Yeah. Manning's going to really take some thought and some design to really, decide. Because even just working with her, there was a half a dozen possible approaches, but we had to come up with one that made sense, that we could actually thought that could apply to multiple scenarios. That's really going to be the trick. Is that important? I think we'd want to really look. If there was a way to eliminate some doors and we felt it would still be effective, we may do that. But it's really going to still be focusing. We really believe when you look at that and kind of can picture the nurse's office becoming this kind of center point, the bottom, like the doors on the lower level, the most important of the three sets. If there was some way to possibly keep those and eliminate the doors on the first floor and the second floor, maybe that's an approach. Or maybe eliminate the first floor and keep them on the second and the lower. Those are questions we're just going to have to figure out and really work with the teachers and the staff that are there on a daily basis, because this is going to impact people's operation, but it's a security issue. You have to somehow secure those entrances. They're not.
Yeah, no question about that. And if this was older students, I probably wouldn't have even asked the question. I'm just concerned about a first grader that goes to the bathroom and gets locked in that security space. And maybe the staff person wasn't with them, or the staff person gave them their fob, or they're really little kids. And again, if they were older, I probably wouldn't have even brought it up. But just the whole entire bathroom area on all three levels is locked into this space, and it just seems tough for really little kids. It seems like a really tough thing.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
I will add, there's certainly a lot of questions here, and I think it just goes without saying that we all wanted a different outcome with what we had talked about before, and obviously it is still our goal to make our buildings safe and secure and everything, but we don't have the funding capacity that we would have if we had a referendum. So, I agree with you, Shannon, it really does seem like it's a tough piece, but I guess what we wanted to do, what our goal for the past, 7 years of talking was to make sure that the buildings were made whole so that they could be used to full capacity based on all the different grades, but we don't have that as an option anymore. So
it could be possible to look at phasing also, where you decided, with a plan that let's do this first and see how on a daily basis it changes the security function. Like say you maybe do the basement doors, but on the first and second, you decide to see, and then you'd have data and experience to see, and you could certainly, the following summer, put in another set of doors.
Let me ask a quick question. You know, at Miller, you're putting the doors at the top of the stairs. Why can't we do that at Manning? Why can't we put the stairs, why can't we put the doors?
Or build it out a little bit if there isn't enough of a landing.
We would, there's not enough of a landing. We wouldn't comply with either the building code, ADA. If we move into the hallway, then we're restricting exiting there and violate the code there. So it's really just, there's not enough elbow room around the stair. That's really the biggest problem.
And I think this, I mean, unfortunately, it goes back to, would have really worked. We can't do. And I think that, and believe me, that's not any criticism of what you're saying at all, but I think it's kind of, so what do we do? You know, what do we do? We're still faced with these issues. So, you know, in a perfect world, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. We would be moving forward with the projects that the community's been asking for so many years. So I think we're, you know, back to where we are about trying to figure out what we can do. So it probably makes sense, you know, what you're talking about, like on the first floor, not the bottom or the second floor. So I guess maybe you're talking, maybe that would be called the second floor. You have an open, a space there with open windows, so people in the office right there, there's a number of people right there.
Right.
But the other two floors, you'd have this other issue about
And with like the
a younger
basement level, it's
child.
going to be less of an issue just because of the functions that are there. You know, you have the lunchroom and art and, you know, music. It's not a hallway loaded with classrooms. So, you know, you could possibly take those two sets of doors out. Actually, when we were doing this cost estimating exercise, initially we didn't have the doors in each level, but I said, well, I don't know what the answer is. This is one design solution. This is going to take months of design with your staff members. For budgeting purposes, we felt it was prudent to include them on all three levels. So we added them, so we had them on all levels. But initially, we started with them just on the lower level. But they're like, well, what if we get through the process and, you know, say it's 900,000, and then we come back, we're like, we really need these doors on the other level. So this is definitely, the glass is more full than empty. But it's going to be, this one, even, I mean, Miller's going to have some hardship too. It's going to be a little trickier, but this is a much bigger school, a lot more kids, and the bathrooms, like you say, are all right there.
It might be worth just trying to figure out if there is any alternative, even on one of either the first or second floor where those classrooms are. Just have a feeling that if we actually even just pretended to do it for a short period of time, had every teacher could not let a student go to the bathroom without being accompanied, walking them, and you know, go through that exercise just to make sure the principal and the staff really knows what they're getting into if that was the final solution. I mean, I obviously completely support securing the school. You know, I'm a little concerned about that particular, you know, is there any other way to get a door in where we're not putting the bathrooms on the other side of those key fobs?
Well, and that, I wanted to bring this up. This is the first floor level, existing first floor at Manning. This isn't in the PowerPoint, but it's a separate slide. When I talked about how the solution, you know, could be you want the entrance on Linden, you know, you really get to decide it would be a different set of stairs. It would actually be this set of stairs right here. And your new functions would straddle that stair. So now the center core area that has the restrooms would remain the way it is. It would definitely be teaching an old dog new tricks in a much greater way, because now you're talking about, you know, visitor parking. You would really force now everybody, there'd be no visitor parking on the alley. You'd have to really get all the parents and everything to be on Linden. You know, the alley would be locked down. That would only be for staff entrance. So that's where we talked about it. And, you know, to be honest, you know, in the short kind of design charrette, it seemed like the alley made the most sense, but you're raising a really valid point, and maybe in light of that and really thinking about the days and the lives of that school, maybe it's more important to keep those bathrooms open and to move the entrance to this side.
Yeah, and I don't know that, but I think the people in the building should really be very, very careful about kind of running that through in their mind. Is it more important to have it convenient for visitors, or is it more important to have it convenient for first graders and second graders and kindergartners
And the teachers that it's
and
going to
who
impact.
can handle
right?
it? Who's able to handle those changes and relearn that and have it function for their day?
Whatever change you make, after about 5-6 years, it'll get better.
We'll figure it out.
Because you'll rotate everyone out of the school and they'll all understand the current scenario.
Well,
The first year will be the worst.
Let me ask a question. And one of the things that you had talked about was that obviously there's, whatever we're talking about a fix that's not the best. And so if you did, once there was much more conversations and all this, what you've presented to us would remain similarly in scope in terms of money because of what you'd be doing would be similar.
Correct.
So what we're talking about is not like this is the absolute end-all, be-all. This is looking at a plan that we can do that is nothing like what we had talked about before.
Correct.
That doesn't even address all the issues. It doesn't address ADA compliance, doesn't address elevators, but our hands are tied.
Right.
So by looking at these different scenarios, you're going to be obviously, and nothing will happen this summer anyway if this
Right.
gets approved because of the amount of work that you have to do. So you have time to work with the administrators and the staff to figure out what is going to be the best solution.
Right.
But the instance of, when you're standing at Miller, you have a much wider open
Right.
place than Manning by that tight door. So
Correct.
I guess my long question is, the amount of the money would remain somewhat.
My
around
thought
the
would be
same?
there'd be adequate funding in this estimate. If for some reason we didn't end up doing anything with the nurse's office, we could possibly reduce some of the cost.
Okay.
But we have the principal's office, if we move it, there's cost to move it anywhere, whether you move it across the stair or to the other side into a different hallway. All the head end, the clock PA systems, all that kind of stuff has to be relocated. We have that in our budget. So where it is, we'll have to find out. And that was actually, we spent, some time talking about it with Kristen for her to get her head around it because, it's going to be a change regardless. So, I think it'll be interesting, but it's going to be, Manning is the challenge. Much more. There's really not many options at Miller. I mean, that's really it, besides doing something with a new office. We did, talk about, is there any way to move part of the office down to the first floor? And there really isn't because there's no space there by the main entrance at Miller.
I just have to say one more thing. I find it interesting, in all the years that I've been in Manning, and, just going in, it never even, this I found interesting, that what you had talked about was switching the two, the office and the nurse's office, and taking out part of that wall and making it a glass enclosed. I guess this is why you put a lot of heads together, because I think that's just brilliant. Now, it's not what we had hoped to do, and it certainly doesn't address everything that we had been talking about doing, but it does do something. It obviously doesn't answer all the questions, but nothing will, I think.
Right.
Now.
It's been discussed. It was interesting talking with Mike about it because, in the past, people have said, is there any way to cut a window in from the office into that stairwell so you can see what's going on? And just the way it goes from first to second, it's in the wrong spot. The window would be looking at the stair going up. You can't see the entrance. So that's when we really started saying, the best spot here to really see that entrance is right here, and that's the nurse's office. So it was really just trying to find a spot. If we went and looked at the Linden being approached, there's a space right now that's being, it used to be deaf and hard of hearing, but it's now, I think it's speech pathologists there, that space is it's a full classroom being used by a small number of people. We could certainly take that space, renovate that, possibly look at the other side of the hallway. We'd have to move some people around, but we certainly could renovate that. So.
And I know I said I had the last question, but I have one more. It is good also to point out that we all know that there's that one classroom at the top of the stairs, but this plan calls for closing off that entrance to that classroom, right?
Right. So modify it. That we might end up moving that door so it's on the other side, but in the short period of time we had, we couldn't figure out what the impact is. So we have money to create a new entrance. The question is just exactly where is that going to be? Would it be here or would we move it to the north? But it would change how the classroom functions currently, and we just didn't have enough time to get into that.
I just had, I guess, one more question. I know there's obviously a lot of planning that's going to have to go in here to Manning. I was really hoping we could get something done faster than that because all the students need some better security. But at Miller, it seems like it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you're putting the doors here, putting the doors there. If we got the funding together in time, is there any way by the time school could start in late August that at least Miller could be done?
It's possible. Whether we'd have enough time, we just would have to see. If we couldn't make that time schedule, then we'd look at, can we do winter break? You know, certain components, like the video component, that could be rolled in during the school year. Using either lobby guard or a Raptor system or something like that, that you could start. So I think any component that we could do immediately, we would. Reglazing some doors, you know, taking tempered glass out and reglazing that door, we could do that right away. So I think we'll want to go after anything we can. It's just whether we could do it quick enough. There's a long lead times on doors like these, and we'd want to really be confident that we have it figured out. But we talked about that when we were at the site, you know, what can happen, how quickly. Manning is going to be more complicated.
Right.
But again, even there, you'd want to do anything you could do in for the next school year and get it done. Because it's all, again, just levels of improving security.
Which would be a similar list, I assume. Reglazing the existing doors, putting in better security cameras, having a person. I mean,
Right.
some of those things are not contingent on these lead times and budget issues.
Right, exactly.
And
And having a person right away would benefit you.
The classroom door locks, Steve.
Exactly, that's happening separately. We're actually out to bid on, there's an abatement project at Manning, I mean. We might make some course adjustments there if we know what we're doing, because there's carpet and mastic that we might want to get out this summer in anticipation of work next year to be more economical. So we'd accomplish as much as we could as quickly as we could. The lion's share happening next year.
Yeah, okay.
And again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you bring up the first floor on Manning again, please? I'm sorry.
First floor?
First floor.
Okay.
So, is there any possibility that traffic coming up the stairs could just be routed through the office? My thought is, of course, then, similar to the junior high, they'd have to go into the office and then out of the office. It would eliminate the need to do anything on the third floor.
No, it's a very good question. At the, what would be the east side of that stairwell, there's not enough room to put any kind of barrier there. The door into that office, if we can make it work, the door could swing to the other side, but then where are people sitting? So it's a very good question. We would have to figure that out.
And my thought then would be, if doable, I don't know how much room you need in the hallway, but if this wall were able to be moved out a little bit as needed to accommodate for the door and everything else like you're saying, but you know, it solves the bathroom issue, it solves the third floor issue. I mean, I don't know how doable it is, I'm just throwing it out.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, that wall, the east wall of that nurse's office is a load-bearing wall. There's a structural column in the corner there. We would just really have to see what can we do. We're confident we can open up that wall on the north side or the south side of the stair for a fixed borrowed light window. Whether we can put a door there, we just have to see.
Sure.
Do both of those corners have structural columns? Both sides of the stairwell? Because it looks like this is a structural column. Are you saying there's one on this side as well?
Yeah, there's columns buried in the masonry walls. When we did the renovation a couple years ago, where we did the classrooms up on the upper level, we got into the structural drawings from back in the 50s and found those columns that actually, when we did that previous project, the door locations might seem a little odd if you really look closely on the second floor, and they were, in a way, forced on us by the location of those buried columns.
Steve, was any consideration given, or is it even a possibility that you could basically build out a vestibule at the entry point off the alley, or even on the other side of the Linden side of Manning? And then you would have a desk there and staff it the same way that is currently proposed at Miller, and that way you wouldn't really be doing, but you would have this secure zone with two kind of exterior doors.
We discussed it, but we didn't have enough time to see if that's really viable.
Okay.
Unfortunately for that, then we're talking about foundations, excavation, bigger issues. It may be possible, and the question would be, is it possible within this budget?
Mm-hmm.
And if it was something we could do and then not impact the inside, there obviously would be a big advantage to that.
It would be worthwhile knowing that, you know, how different the number is.
Right.
Just adding that first story vestibule and giving you a double set of doors and, yeah. I
Right.
mean, you're at what, about 8 million right now for Manning, the number? Is that what
No,
it was?
million,
Oh, million?
120.
1117.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, it'd be worthwhile knowing how different that number is.
That's where, there's a lot of design work required at Manning. I mean, this was really trying to see, you know, again, you know, can we do something like a $275,000 project like Miller or not? The answer was no.
Right.
But then what is the answer? Ironically, I mean, this really surprised me when we got back to the old drawings. I told Mike, and then Kevin this, is when that portion, the 1950s portion of Manning was built, there were kindergarten rooms out in the parking lot. They're indicated on the drawings, and I've never seen any photos of that or anything, but there was a fairly temporary corridor that went out, so kind of where the loading ramp is that goes down the lower level, somewhere out in that footprint, it called for existing kindergarten rooms. So it must have been a temporary structure of some sort. But I've never seen anything beyond that. We never saw any drawings for it, so.
I guess part of this, for me, is that I think this conversation that we're having tonight, obviously, is, and I keep going back to it, it's like, it's hard to take a building that's been built over generations and stuff, and to do something with it without trying to recreate something. So, you know, I guess I would say I appreciate seeing what some options are, and I know, that's why I guess I asked that question, like, so we can do something with,
Right.
somewhat in the budget that you're talking about, unless you know, look and see what, if you're talking about a vestibule, you're talking about like adding on to the outside then, right? So that would have to be enough for at least one person, and then people coming
Like a
in.
waiting room, basically,
Yeah.
you know.
Until they go up.
An entryway waiting room.
Okay.
At
So
a minimum,
that-
would have to extend out at least 7 to 8 feet out to meet ADA.
Right.
But then now we get into, you know, what elevation is that? Right now, there's a step up to that door. We wouldn't be permitted to do that, so we'd be modifying the parking lot to change the grade. So there was just a lot of things we weren't sure about. So, and also, we were trying to stay away from any addition because you just get into more costs. So, but it's certainly a good point. Manning, you know, I bet we'll go through plenty of design options before we get to the final solution.
I think, I mean, I personally, the goal was to have the Linden entrance be the main entrance and get away from this alley, you know, entrance. So I, you know, in this process of looking at what we can work with this budget, it would be good to see something that is a possibility for that, because I think that's a little truer to what we were trying to accomplish in kind of turning the entrances on that building around a little bit, so. I guess I'd asked if, you know, in that process that be explored a little further.
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely is part of the plan, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's, yeah, because if you can take and have visitors park off of,
Well, if you have a vestibule that goes out, then the person sitting in there gets to see north, south, you know, and
Right.
east.
Right.
You know, if it's a
Right.
whole windowed area, which is what you were trying to accomplish with a larger,
Absolutely.
you know, and so there is some advantages security-wise to being able to see down the street what's
Right.
happening. You know, so it's something I think that's worth considering.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
probably, you know, on an uneducated guess in that dollar.
Yeah, I would think
amount
we're
or
somewhere in the range. And that truly, if you built that school again, the entrance would be on Linden. I mean, the current layout is not really the way it was intended. So I think if there was a lot of parking out there, it would have always been on Linden, but you just had the advantage of that alley and having parking there. So that's really kind of forced that west entrance to be the main entrance. So.
let's use advantage with air quotes. Having the alley. So just to recap, so what we're looking at tonight, we're not voting on anything tonight. We're looking at this, and none of these, well, not none of these, but a lot of these plans are conceptual that once we take a look at this, is something that you would, you know, work through with the administration,
Right.
principals, and and that to come up with the best we can do within
This
budget.
was more of a budget exercise, because, and again, we didn't have a design team assembled, we really didn't have a chance to go through the process, but, how big of a problem is it to make a solution? We know we're somewhere, less than $500,000, we can certainly make a big improvement at Miller. What's the solution at Manning? Manning is going to be the hardest to solve, and we certainly would want to investigate everything on paper and in the 3D model as much as possible to make sure whatever we do is the smartest thing to do, is the best use of your money, and the smartest solution for today, and then for what the future may hold. You wouldn't want to do something that could paint yourself into a corner in the future. Ironically, this goes back quite a ways. Years ago, when we were asked to study an elevator at Manning, forget anything about security or whatever, the location for it was that other stair that
This stair here.
this was considered the best location, was losing that stair and making that the accessible entrance. So we'd want to really think about those things, because say your accessibility needs, your student body changes, and you really have a problem where lifts are not functional. You need an elevator. Where would we put it? And does that somehow affect what we're doing today? So there'd be a lot of focusing on today, thinking maybe 10 years out, but then also thinking about what happens if, 10 years from now, you really need to put an elevator in. Where would we put it? We don't want to have an answer to that question.
So what this does too, then, if you think about what you put before us here, is it takes the junior high and the high school, and it gives them the doors and the walls that they need. So it kind of, as a very smart person told me once, it levels the field in our district that now at least all the rooms would have doors and walls.
Correct.
So, and keeping with the, the learning environment for the students and that, and the tougher nut to crack is the security issues.
None of these buildings were designed with this in mind. It's a fairly recent issue. As I mentioned before, it's not even codified anywhere. We focus on fire safety. That's really the biggest focus of all the building codes. This building security and safety from intruders, someday may show up in the codes, but it's not there yet. It's an emerging, unfortunately, area of concern.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I forgot to mention something real quick, in that, again, we are not voting on this tonight, and I would like to mention that at our next board meeting, May 5th, we are going to be introducing and welcoming 2 new board members to our board. One is Judy Wilson, who's here in the room listening to this conversation, and the other one is Lori Ambrose, who couldn't be here tonight, but she is paying attention and she is watching this, so that when a vote is taken, the people who are going to be at the table are aware. So thank you, Judy, for being here tonight. So we appreciate that. So you're getting to get up to speed. Okay, then the next item on the agenda, talking about funding these projects. Liz Hennessy. And many of us know you, but could you introduce yourself again? Sure. When you're done, and you can.
Thanks, Liz.
Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm Elizabeth Hennessy. I'm with William Blair and Company. We are a bond underwriting firm out of Chicago. We have had the pleasure of working with the district since, I believe, 2003 on various financing. And my purpose tonight is to give you some options for financing without referendum, non-referendum financing options paid from the bond and interest levy, so it would not be affecting your operating funds. So if we go ahead to the market overview. The good news is the bond market continues to be extremely strong. On page 1, we show the blue line at the bottom is the Fed funds rate, which is very close to 0. The blue line is a bond buyer index for 20-year bonds, the average, and those are for AA2 rated bonds. And then the green line is the 10-year Treasury. And municipal bonds typically follow the Treasury bond market. Page 2 looks at the yield curve. So here we're looking at interest rates from year 1 all the way through year 30. The green line is where we are now. And you can see we're at or near our historic lows. The blue line is historic low in 2013. The green line in the first 10 years has come up a little bit, but is actually lower out in years 25 through 30. So very good bond market. If we go to the financing options section, I'd like to review the district's ability to issue bonds without referendum. Part of the tax cap was the authorization of a debt service extension base based on the tax levy for bonds back in 1994. And the district happened to have a levy around $1.1 million in 2009. That levy the tax cap law was amended to include a CPI factor on that debt service extension base, that $1.1 million that was levied in 1994. So at this point in 2015, when we know that CPI is 0.8%, our debt service extension base is $1,283,352. And what this means is the district can go ahead and issue bonds that are not subject to referendum as long as the payments for those bonds does not exceed that $1,283,352. And then each year you'll get another CPI factor added to that. The district currently has some bonds that are outstanding, being repaid with that debt service extension base that were issued in 2012 for life safety and working cash purposes. So that kind of brings us to the 3 types of bonds that you can issue without referendum. We've got working cash fund bonds. They can be used for either capital or operating, but when they're issued on a tax-exempt basis, the purpose is really restricted for capital. The requirements include a petition period and a public hearing prior to issuance. The second type of bonds are life safety bonds. Bonds may be issued for life safety purposes for projects that have been approved by the DuPage Regional Office of Education and the Illinois State Board of Education. So your architect would embark upon a amendment process that would be presented to the board. The board would approve the life safety amendments, and then they would go for approval at the state, local and state level. Once approved, that stands as the authority to issue the bonds. You do need a public hearing, though, for life safety bonds. The third type of bonds is called funding bonds, and these are to pay any debt obligations or claims against the district. So if you had an outstanding debt certificate or lease obligation that you were paying from your operating funds, you could issue funding bonds to repay that. So then the debt base, which is paid by the bond and interest levy, would be funding those projects as opposed to operating funds. So funding bonds refers to really a 2-step process where you're issuing debt certificates, which are paid from the operating funds, and then refunding it with the funding bonds. Funding bonds, like working cash bonds, require the petition period and the public hearing process. So just on the petition period, what that involves is the board would approve a resolution of intent to issue working cash fund bonds, publish that in the newspaper. That would begin a 30-day petition period, and if within those 30 days, 10% of the registered voters would submit a petition to the district, it would be required to be voted on at referendum. So limited bonds do not negatively impact the operating funds of the district. They're paid from that debt service extension base, so it's not really an increase in the taxes that you're paying, but it's an extension of the amount that you have been paying since 1994 for non-referendum bonds, with that CPI factor then added to it. Okay. So the best practice on these type of limited bonds is to pay them off as quickly as possible so that you have access to that debt base for future projects. Page 4 looks at your statutory debt limit with your now new 2014 EAV of $429,877,574. The statutory debt limit is 13.8%, less the principal amount of your bonds outstanding gives you a net debt limit of $52,083,105. So that's your overall debt limit. Working cash fund debt limit is separate part of the statute. You look at your 2014 EAV again, times your maximum education fund rate of $4. And that gives you a maximum education fund possible extension of $17,195,000. The formula requires you to add the 2015 corporate personal property replacement tax estimate, which is an amount of state funding you get. Then you take that total times 85% to get your maximum working cash limit of $14.8 million. Subtract the greater of your working cash fund bonds outstanding or your working cash fund balance, which gives you a net working cash fund bonding limit of $9.9 million. Okay, so of those 3 types of bonds, working cash, life safety, and funding, your maximum limit on working cash is $9.9 million. You could issue other types. Okay, let's go to page 6. And starting on the left side of the page, we've got your levy year, the historic EAVs. Unclear what future EAV increases are going to be, so we've assumed 0. Clearly, there will be increases in the future. It's just hard to know based on the recovering real estate values. The next column is that debt service extension base, and as you can see, in the 2015 year, where we know the CPI to be 0.8%, the debt service extension base is $1,283,352. Then we've got the outstanding non-referendum debt service, and we've got 5 years more of payments ending in 2019 levy year. The column labeled debt capacity is your remaining debt capacity. And just if you look at the top numbers in 2011 and 2012, those are some big negative numbers. When we issued the bonds in 2012, we had the option of either capitalizing interest or using some accumulated funds in the debt service fund, which was the lower cost option. So those negative amounts were actually paid with funds in the debt service fund. Going forward, we've assumed a 1.5% CPI that we will continue to watch closely as we learn the monthly CPI estimates to see if we'll actually be at 1.5 or it would be something less. So hopefully we'll have a little more information as the year goes on what we should be estimating for 2016 and thereafter. Just to mention, the historical CPI, as you may know, is right around 2.1%, but we always like to make a lower estimate when we look at the CPI for the debt service extension base, because if you estimate too high, you have to dip into other funds to come up with the money for those debt payments, which are usually on a fixed rate basis. So the highlighted amounts in yellow represent the available debt service extension base. The tax rate for your current non-referendum debt is about 30 cents. Okay? So what we're looking at is just some examples of what could you do for funding some projects. So The first option is really just to give you your outside limit. In the statute, you're only allowed to amortize bonds over a maximum period of 20 years. So if we went out 20 years at today's interest rates, the maximum amount you could get is $15.48 million. So that would represent the maximum without referendum. And you noticed, of course, the working cash limit is 9.9 million, so you'd have to do some other types of bonds to supplement that to get up to the 15.48 million. But if you were to pursue something like that, you should be aware that it really would effectively use all your limited bonding capacity for the future. So that would not be the recommendation because it would pretty much tie your hands for future issuance. Option 2 looks at issuing $9 million of limited bonds and paying it off as quickly as possible for 12 years is what it would require at today's interest rates. And option 3 is $9 million again, repaid as quickly as possible through 2022, then leaving a channel, if you will, of $500,000 within the debt base to give you a window that might be needed in about 7 years. So, go ahead.
Is that refinancing at that point? Is that what you're saying? Pay as fast as possible till 2022 and then?
Yeah, no, it's not refinancing, it's just reducing the payments. So we're not using up the full 1.2 million, just dropping it down, leaving you like a window of $500,000. So if you had additional projects in that year, you could fold them in at that point. Now, as you know, you've got your 2012 bonds outstanding. So each of these options requires refunding a slice of those 2012 bonds in order to make room for new interest payments on new bonds, okay? So that is, let's go to the options and you'll see how that works in. Okay, so if we go to page 8 and we go to the middle of the page, we see we've got 16.52 million Series 2016 refunding and new money debt service. This again is the maximum 20-year option. But if you look in the first 5 years, we're paying interest only on this bond. And if we go to the column next door, you can see we're refunding portions of that 2012 enough to make room just to pay the interest on the new bonds. So that's what we have to do. We have to refund a portion of the existing bonds when there's not room, if you will, in that debt base to pay bonds, pay off new bonds till 2019. So in this case, going out the 20 years, we mentioned gets you $15.48 million at a cost of 3.56% in terms of your all-in interest costs. Still low rates because rates are low, which is great. The negative here is that it would use up your entire bonding capacity for 20 years. And if you go to page 9, you can see graphically how that looks. We've got the refunding debt service in green, and then the blue bars is the new money principal and interest, getting you a principal or proceeds of $15.4 million. Okay, option 2. Option 2 is an example of a $9 million new money proceeds, working cash with refunding paid off as quickly as possible under the debt base. And historically, that has been your approach. You've been paying your bonds off as quickly as possible because, number one, it's the lowest interest cost option, typically. But, you know, typically you've come to market since 2003 every 4 to 6 years with more life safety or things you need to do to fund capital improvements on aging buildings. So this option goes out to 2027, 12 years, and you can see we're refunding about 1.7 million of that 2012 to make room. The district then would have room again in the year 2027 to issue more bonds. So the question is, if you decide as a board to move forward with some projects at this point, when would you need to go back and do a phase 2 or a phase 3 within your long-term capital plan? Because if you pursued an option 2 like this, and you had a need in 2022 or 23, we would do exactly what we're proposing to do right now, refunding a small portion of the existing bonds to make room for a new issue.
So you mentioned in the document that that is the least interest, doing it the option 2-way, but what's the cost of refunding? I mean, how does that balance out against we're paying the least amount of interest?
Right, you're paying the least amount of interest just because you're paying it off as quickly as possible. And to determine the amount of the cost of a refunding, we'd have to know 2 things: how much you're looking at issuing down the road and what interest rates are going to be down the road. 2 big question marks, right?
You have your crystal ball handy.
Yeah, exactly. Good. But whenever you refund and stretch out debt, there is a cost. There's also the thing when if we go back to our yield curve, remember those short-term rates, if they continue to stay low, we get the benefit of, issuing bonds with the lower short-term rates down the road. So I can't give you an exact answer on that, but I would just encourage you to think about when the next time you might need to issue bonds. So if $9 million is the scope now, when would you be back for a phase 2 if the ultimate goal is to try to accomplish over a long period of time the things that you thought were the most important for safety and security through the referendum? So let's look at, page 11 looks at the graphic of option 2, but let's go to option 3, where we've got a channel in 2022. And I just chose 2022. Who knows if that's the right year? That's 7 years out. Maybe it's 5 years out. Maybe it's 6 years out. It's just a matter of figuring those things out. So if we create a channel, if you look at the green box, you can see that we've created a room for another $500,000 of principal and interest to start being paid off in 2022. That requires our $9 million issue to go out a little further. The final maturity in this case is the year 2030. So we're going out about 8 more years to do that. Now, I've left a $500,000 channel. I think that's a good number, but you could probably get away with $300,000 or $400,000 instead of $500,000, which would mean your bonds are a little shorter. There's lots of things we can tweak to make this different, fit your particular needs with regard to capital funding. But I think the thing I'd like you to think about in option 3 is if we create a channel, whether it's in year 7 or year 5, that's a great thing. But if you get a future board and you're down in year 5 or 7 when that channel occurs, and you say, we got a huge construction grant from Springfield. We don't have to issue any bonds. Okay, we can be optimistic, right? And you don't need to use that money. That's great. The tax rate will drop. And then when you go back for your 10-year life safety survey or something like that to issue more bonds, the tax rate goes up. So what can occur is a little bit of a roller coaster in the tax rate, which is not well, it's kind of bad. People like their tax bills to be pretty stable and even. So that's just one thing to consider. If you create a channel, you might create it with the thought that, yeah, we're going to have a phase 2. We know we have additional capital projects under our capital plan. We're not 100% sure when that's going to come in, but we think it's going to come in year 5 and 7 and then kind of plan to that end. Is that helpful? Mm-hmm. If we look at the graph on page 13, you can see how that channel comes in 2022. And again, lots of flexibility of where to put that. I thought that simply made sense because, we've got 2 good years to pay off bonds after the 2012s mature in 2019. But again, it's really up to you and your capital plan and what fits your needs the best.
And that interest rate's higher, 3.15 as opposed to 2.81.
That's correct.
Option 2 and option 3.
That's correct.
And that's because of time.
Exactly.
Right.
8 years longer, yeah. Or no, it's not 8 years, 27 versus 30, 3 years longer, sorry. So the discussion, we've kind of had the discussion as we've gone through these, but again, you know, option one is not recommended because it takes your flexibility off the table for future. Option two pays the bonds off as quickly and is the lowest interest rate, and option three also pays off bonds quickly, but again, leaves you some flexibility, a window, if you will, out in the year 2022. Questions?
So an increase in CPI is going to put us in a less favorable position. I mean, we're estimating 1.5 all the way down here, right? So can you just walk us through if it's really 1% or if it ends up being 3%? Like what is the net impact in the service capacity column, in the, not actual numbers, just generally speaking, what's the net impact of CPI doesn't float in that 1.5%?
Right. So let's say we lock in the debt service at 1.5%. When most school districts issue bonds, they issue them at a fixed rate. Okay, so we know what our payments are going to be, and we've built in a 1.5% increase. If the 1.5 turns into 1%, then we're going to be short a few years. So we have to dip into the debt service fund balance to the extent you have it. If not, we'll have to look towards operating funds. If we have a couple years of 1% and then we get a couple years of 3%, what you will get from us monitoring this is what's called a supplemental levy for debt service, which will be approved at the same time as your regular levy. So that will allow you to levy up to the 3% and reimburse yourself for prior years where you might have had to dip into some funds where a 1% might have occurred when we assumed 1.5. So on average, what we're saying is, you know, over the life of these bonds, we're estimating 1.5%. So the supplemental levy is a way to make that up. And, you know, some districts, well, not many, but the way we look at the CPI is we always build in something. If we think 1.5 is too high, we can scale that back. But you can never levy more than your debt service payments. So if we assume 0 for CPI, yet we got a 1.5%, we would be not accessing the full amount of the debt base that we otherwise could have and not paying the bonds off as fast as we otherwise could have. So.
Shannon, so in other words, when the CPI is greater, that's to our advantage.
Yes, yeah, I got it.
That we
Thanks.
have more debt service capacity.
And the 9 million in example, or option 2 and option 3, is that we're netting 9 million
Yes.
out of this process? And so on here somewhere is our gross number?
Well, like, let's look at option 3.
Uh-huh.
And if you go to the middle page, it says Series 2015, 11.2 million. So the extra 2 million is the refunding portion of the debt. So the refunding bonds are issued simultaneously with the new money.
Okay, I have a question. So, thank you, first of all, for giving us options, and thank you very much for saying option number 1 doesn't look favorable, because I think we had kind of chatted about that once before. So, hypothetically, and I'm going to kind of ask this question to Kevin too. So, we could take up to, let's say, 15 million. We could. We won't, but we could. But we're looking at 9. So that still leaves us with 6 million in bond capacity for a future date. Am I correct on that?
You're correct. And the other thing, every year that goes by, you get another year at the end of the schedule. So that 20-year period, you know, moves out.
Okay.
So that 6 million that you mentioned will go up every
So
year.
like 7 and
Yeah.
that. So the question that I have, I've asked this to Kevin, so I'm not putting him on the spot, but as a superintendent, would you be comfortable with having our bonding capacity at 6 million if we chose to do something like this? Do you think that is enough of a rainy day fund, such as it is?
Right, and as Elizabeth said, we had a crystal ball.
Right.
But no, I think that this does allow us enough flexibility that if there was some significant event that occurred, we'd have some resources available to us. So I think it does provide the district with
Okay, because that to me was very important, because, obviously we are looking at different funding than what we were looking at before with not having the referendum. So, and the question is, are we living within our means and such as it is? And so this is bonding capacity that districts use when they really need capital projects. And I think if we look over the past, 8 years, we've been looking at the same issues over and over and over again. So we are addressing our needs with the bonding capacity that we currently have. So as one board member, I feel comfortable with that. But it was important to me to find out from the superintendent if that is enough of a cushion for future projects. I mean, we've been talking about these projects for so long. I mean, we're talking about these walls at the high school since it was built. So in looking out further, the one thing that I feel is like, I don't know that we can really spend a whole lot of time looking at the future. Not that that's not important, but I think it's like you have to kind of fix the past before you go and move to the future. So that's why it's important for me to find out, we have 6 million. We would have 6 million capacity, and then that goes up every year, so that we are not using option 1, which is using all the bonding capacity for the district, because I know I would feel very uncomfortable, and I couldn't sit with that. But so it just, for the purpose of asking that question, and that felt comfortable to me. Then I have another question, and this came up quite a bit when we were talking about the the TIF money, because that seems to be something that people are really interested in, and we are. So the question that I had asked Kevin, and I wanted to ask this again too to make sure that I understand, and obviously, so if the TIF money came in, and we know from what we have seen so far where we are with the the money we have. So if TIF money started to come in, how would that affect this? And again, I asked Kevin this before, but I think it's also important. I'm saying that just so that it doesn't sound like I'm putting Kevin on the spot here now, but I did want to have this question here. So could you talk about that a little bit, Kevin?
You can correct me if I'm wrong, Liz. But, well, first of all, the TIP money can only go into the Manning projects. So the Manning portion of the bonds, and there's no penalty for paying off the bonds early.
There's not a call premium. Now, typically municipal bonds that are, 10 years or less are not callable, like your 2012s. Bonds are not like a mortgage that are callable anytime. Investors charge a higher interest rate if you ask for that feature. But they would be callable after 10 years. So there's 2 ways you could use that money. Let's assume you fund part of your Manning project through the bond issue. So we'd know what principal of that $9 million, in this case, went towards Manning, and we could do a couple things. We could accumulate the TIF money, and then at the call date, pay them off up to that amount. So we'd call in without penalty, no prepayment penalty, those bonds. But, it might take a while to accumulate that TIF money anyway, so it all might work out in a serendipitous way with regard to that. Alternatively, if you got bigger chunks of TIF money, you could abate some of that debt service levy with the TIF money, okay? That would lower your taxes to the taxpayers and give you additional room in your debt base. But the bigger bang for the buck is to pay off the principal at the call date. So those are kind of the two ways you could use that money.
Okay, good, thank you. That's what I had.
So just to clarify, with option 3, for the first, from 2015 to the end of 2021, we would be using substantively all of our available debt service base.
Yes.
Then, beginning in that 7th or 8th year, however we count these, that is when we would then have an additional $500,000 and growing every year of non-ref bond capacity. But the first 7 years, we're paying off at such a rate that it is eating up substantively all of our bonding capacity.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I put John's spot again?
I guess, sure.
Okay, so, again, this is, we're dealing with past, capital projects that we're looking at trying to take care of. What would you recommend? And you maybe don't even have to answer that tonight because we're not voting, but what do you see as?
It depends on, again, the board. When it would be anticipated that you'd have the next significant amount of projects. And so if you think it's going to be on a 5 to 7 year cycle, then probably the lower risk option is option 3 because you start to build in that capacity. If we're not sure about that, and sometimes the school of thought is to pay off the bonds as quickly as possible, lower interest rate, so you'd go with option 2. Then if 5 years down the road there was that need for facilities, then you would go through a refunding process to create that opportunity to issue those bonds. And then the risk there is what the interest rate would be at that time.
Right.
And there's a cost, involved in issuing bonds. And so, I mean, that's ultimately what you're weighing is it comes down to when you think that next set of capital projects will be.
Yeah, I think tying up all of our non-ref bonding capacity for more than 5 to 7 years is questionable. Personally, my personal opinion, but.
Well, but we're every year we get another $1 million back in capacity. Obviously, there is a refunding.
Not if you look at the chart. It shows you on there what our capacity would be each year, and if you go with option 2, you're tying up all, so it's not 100%, but it's a substantive all of your bonding capacity for that term. Okay. Unless you go back and do what Kevin suggested, which potentially cost us quite a bit more than if we just plan ahead and know that every 5 to 7 years we need more money, which seems to be the trend if you look historically. I guess it just depends how realistic you're really being, but to think that in 5 to 7 years, more than 5 to 7 years, we're going to want or need additional money. You really think it's going to be 10 or 12 or 15 years from now before we're going to need additional money? I'm not sure how realistic that is, truthfully, particularly given these crazy buildings, right? I mean, Manning's been built since 1920, right? It's been built, and then it was built again, and then it was built again. I mean, we have some just really odd, challenging things going on, and to think we might not need to have some room there, in this shorter time frame, I think, we definitely need to consider that pretty seriously.
So under option 2, we could not do this exercise again.
No, you could.
Okay, so that's what I'm
Just
getting.
at additional cost,
As additional
as
cost.
Kevin mentioned.
Right. So. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions?
No.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Liz.
Very
Nice
much
to see you.
appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
A couple items to report. First of all, the last several board meetings, we've had information about an Illinois Reads event, and it did occur last Saturday. And Amy Quattro will be at the May 5th board meeting to do a more formal report. But definitely was an overwhelming success. And I don't have the exact figures. The estimate is we're pretty close to that 500 mark for attendance. And just, feedback from community members who were there, and just in general, when you just look at the volunteers and all the organizations that were represented. So it was really a tremendous success. And so Amy will be here at our next board meeting to talk a little bit about that. And then the other good news to report is that the Washington Post High School Challenge Index came out, and Westmont High School is ranked number 18 in the state of Illinois on the Challenge Index. We're the highest ranked school of our size, and then also the second ranked school in DuPage County. And then I also did a little math, and we're in the top 3% in the nation with our ranking. And so
All right,
kudos.
Wow.
I saw Jack here earlier, but I see he's not here right now. But anyway, that's fantastic.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Wow.
You want to say that like 3 more times? Just so we
Just for impact.
don't, okay, well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. All right, are there any board reports? Okay. Are there any public comments? All right, then the upcoming meeting. Okay, Miller School Spring Choral Concert, April 29th at 7 o'clock at Miller School. Manning School Spring Choral Concert, April 30th at 7 o'clock at Westmont High School.
That's not right.
Is that not right?
No, it's May 1st. It's Friday, May 1st.
This is Friday, yeah.
This Friday.
The junior high.
Junior high.
Is
No,
this
this is
Friday.
Manning.
All right, I'm
Junior high has
Yeah, I got a long list that Judy gives me here.
Oh, I'm reading it too, and it said Manning, and I said,
Okay,
All right.
and actually, the junior high's not on here. So the junior high
Friday.
choral concert,
Friday,
it's
May
Friday,
1st.
May 1st.
Friday, May 1st. Okay, that at 7 o'clock
Sorry.
At the junior high.
at the junior high.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not on here. And then the next school board meeting is May 5th at 7 o'clock here at Westmont Village Hall. And that will be the meeting that we say goodbye to a couple of our board members and welcome our new board members. So that meeting, there will be a little reception beforehand for that.
6:30, Marie?
It's 6:30.
6:30, yes. And the meeting starts at 7, but the
7.
reception starts at 6:30. Okay. Do we have any votes?
No.
Then the chair will entertain a motion to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining, personnel issues, student discipline, and probable litigation.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, my God.
And Mary Kay.
You
Get
decide.
that? They're just
decide
dying to
which
be the
way.
last to do that. All right, roll call, please. Mrs. McMahon?
Mrs. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Matbush?
yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Ms. Caprelli?
Yes?
Mrs. Charlton?
Yes.